All right, let's dive into a really powerful story from the book of Exodus. It gets at a fundamental question, one that I think we all wrestle with. When a promise is made, especially a divine one, what does the proof actually look like? How do you know it's real? We're going to explore the signs God gives.
So yeah, that's the big question, isn't it? How do you know it's really from God? I mean, it's a question about trust, about proof. And honestly, it's a question that probably hits home for a lot of us in our own moments of uncertainty. And what's wild is that this is the exact question a man named Moses is about to ask.
Okay, to really feel the weight of this moment, you've got to understand the scene. We're talking about 400 years of silence, 4 centuries. The people of Israel are enslaved in Egypt, suffering, and it feels like their prayers have just been echoing into an empty sky. And the guy chosen to lead them, Moses, he's a shepherd, basically in hiding. And he is not jumping at the chance. He's reluctant, full of doubt.
And that brings us right to our first section here. This story doesn't kick off with some heroic, bold faith. Nope. It starts with a very real, very human crisis of belief.
I mean, listen to what Moses asks God directly. What if they do not believe me or listen to my voice? And this isn't him being weak. This is just realism. He knows these people. After centuries of pain and silence, he gets that just showing up with a message isn't going to cut it. He needs proof, not just for himself, but for the people he's supposed to save. And God's response to this is, well, it's just fascinating, because before he takes on the big bad enemy, before any of the plagues or the big dramatic showdowns, his very first move is to turn to his own people and comfort them with a promise. He tells Moses to go to the elders of Israel and say this: I have surely seen what is done to you in Egypt. Just notice the tenderness in that. The first message isn't about judgment on Egypt. It's reassurance for Israel. It's God essentially saying, hey, I see you. I haven't forgotten you. And that phrase, I have surely seen, is just packed with so much meaning. In the original Hebrew, this isn't like a passive glance from a distance. It implies this active, super attentive awareness. It's a promise that action is coming and coming soon. This is the language of a God who is about to step in, all because of a promise he made a long, long time ago. And that leads to a really crucial point. Maybe the most important takeaway here. God's rescue mission, it's not based on how good or worthy the Israelites are. Not at all. It's based entirely on who he is. It's grounded in the faithfulness of his own character. He's a promise-keeping God, and that's the only foundation their hope needs. So once that message of reassurance is established for his people, the whole tone shifts, like dramatically. The focus moves from comfort right into confrontation.
And get this, before Moses even takes a single step back towards Egypt, God lays it all out for him. He says, the king of Egypt will not let you go unless compelled by a mighty hand. So there's no surprise here. God is basically saying, look, this isn't going to be easy. Pharaoh is going to resist. He already knows how hard the human heart can be when it decides to oppose him. And this reveals a really key idea in the whole story. Pharaoh's resistance, his stubbornness, it doesn't frustrate God's plan. It actually serves it. It becomes the very stage where God is going to display his incredible, overwhelming power. That resistance becomes part of the rescue. You see this phrase all over the Bible, the hand of God or his outstretched arm. It's this powerful symbol for his direct, active intervention in history. You can almost picture it like God rolling up his sleeves to get things done. So Pharaoh, he might think he's the one in charge, but he is about to go head-to-head with the very hand that created the universe. So the big question is, how does God prove all this? Well, he goes right back to Moses' original fear. What if they don't believe me? And he answers it directly. Not with words, but with 3 specific, very symbolic signs. Okay, so the first sign. God asks Moses a simple question. What's that in your hand? And it's just his shepherd's staff, right? An ordinary, everyday tool. God tells him, throw it on the ground. And when he does, it becomes a serpent. Now, this wasn't just some random magic trick. The symbolism here is huge. In ancient Egypt, the cobra was a major symbol of royal and divine authority. It was literally on the front of Pharaoh's crown. So by turning a humble shepherd's staff into that very symbol and then back again, God is making a massive statement. He's showing that Pharaoh's power, his divine authority, is nothing more than a stick in God's hand. All right, sign number 2. God tells Moses, put your hand inside your cloak.
He does. He pulls it out, and it's covered in leprosy. It's diseased. Then God says, put it back in. He does, pulls it out again, and it's completely healed, totally normal.
And again, this symbolism is so important. In that ancient world, leprosy was this terrifying thing. It represented uncleanness, decay, even God's judgment. So with this one simple action, God is demonstrating that he has total and complete authority over the human condition itself. He can bring sickness and he can bring healing. He is sovereign over life, over purity, over it all.
And that brings us to the third and final sign, which is basically a direct warning. God tells Moses, okay, if they still don't believe you after those first two signs, then you're to take water from the Nile River, pour it onto the dry ground, and it will turn into blood.
And you have to understand, the Nile wasn't just a river to the Egyptians. It was their lifeblood. It was the source of all their prosperity, their food. They even worshipped it as a god. So this sign is a direct attack on the very heart of Egyptian power and religion. It's also a terrifying preview of the plagues that are about to come, showing that God has the authority to take a nation's greatest blessing and turn it into a curse.
So these three signs were incredibly powerful. They were the proof that Moses and the people of Israel needed. But, in the grand narrative of the Bible, they aren't the final word. They're seen as shadows, as signposts, pointing forward to something much bigger, a true and a greater sign. And this is where the story makes a huge leap. If you look at the signs Moses did and compare them to the miracles of Jesus, you see a really critical difference. Moses' signs, they pointed beyond himself, to the God who sent him. They were there to validate him as the messenger. But Jesus' signs, they pointed directly to himself. They validated his identity as the message. See, Moses' signs were like shadows of God's power. Jesus' miracles were the substance of God's power, right there in the flesh. And this all builds to the ultimate sign, the final proof, the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. In the Christian faith, this is presented as God's final, undeniable validation, his decisive sign that proves Christ's identity, his mission, and that all of God's promises are true. So we end up right back where we started, with a question. The story of Exodus shows us a God who is gracious enough to provide proof for a doubting people. The New Testament then claims that the ultimate proof, the final sign, has been given in Jesus. And that leaves the final question, not for God, but for us. The sign has been given. What are we going to do with it?